Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld.
Hello, all you geeks out there. This is Cheryl, and Ed's going to be coming up later in this episode. But today I want to talk about holiday gift giving for your geeks. And if your geek is like my geek, he's almost impossible to shop for. Not because you don't know what to get him, but because his list is about 7.5 miles long. He wants anything and everything. So it can be a little hard sometimes to narrow it down. For those of you who have a lot of geeks on your list, though, you might need a lot of different ideas so you don't buy everyone the same thing. So I was checking out some sites, and all of these people I'm going to talk about, all of these shops have Twitter accounts that we follow. So if you go to our Twitter at Geek Homeworld and click on our list, you'll see there Geek Gifts is the list you can follow to find all of them there. One of the really unique things that's out there is a product called Stick to the Story, and this is a man up in Ontario, Canada named Dave. Now, some of you may have seen him at various conventions, but he does one-of-a-kind handcrafted wooden staffs as well as wands. So you can buy something he already has on hand, or you can commission something to get exactly as you want. So if you have someone who's into Lord of the Rings, that might be cool, or maybe Harry Potter if you want a wand. He also does pendulum and other things. I couldn't find an actual website for him, but he's on Facebook, and you can contact him through there. Still has some availability for shopping before Christmas if you want to get something in before that. And the prices are really reasonable. They tend to range between $35 and $80, and I think for a custom staff, that's a pretty good price. Another great site that you can check out is Tech Gifts for Him, which offers a variety of really super cool products that range from night vision goggles to wearable devices like Fitbit and smartwatches. And you can get according to what they think is best. They also have a section where you can shop by what are the most affordable gifts. They have reviews that are really brief and easy to read, so you can check those out pretty quickly. And it looks like one of the number one gifts on their site, which is listed on their top gifts, as well as on their list of affordable gifts, is the Anker 2nd Generation Astro Mini, which is the product where it's about the size and shape of a lipstick, but it can instantly charge your mobile devices. So you can take it anywhere with you, just plug in and get a recharge. Most devices, it will charge 100%. Some of them a little less than 100%, but for an emergency backup when you can't find power to get your battery going, that is a great product to get. So they are recommending that on Tech Gifts for Him. The Wonk Shop is another one which I thought was really cool. It's run by a couple of women, and so they do take into account that there are female geeks out there as well. They offer a variety of clothing and jewelry, as well as housewares and electronics that feature, Star Trek and Star Wars and Doctor Who and everything else in between. They have a section for wonk ladies as well as a section for wonk dudes, as they say. And it's really a fun little shop. One of the fun things about it is that they do their reviews as little videos. So you get to see them and get to really enjoy the products and see what they're really up to rather than just reading. And I know I'm not really a big video person, but I know that Ed loves to watch videos. I'd rather read through and find exactly what I'm looking for. But a lot of folks out there are really into videos, so you can check that out with them. Now, if your geek is a Trekker, loves Star Trek, Trekker, Trekkie, whichever one they prefer. Sometimes it's a generational thing. But there's a kind of cool site called Trek Tangles, which offers minimalist Star Trek artwork, both as artwork itself or on stationery, on iPod cases, iPhone cases, different skins, as well as clothing and mugs and rugs and really anything that you can put artwork on. Right now, you can sign up to be on their nice list, is what they call it, which will make the holiday shopping a little bit easier. You can sign up to get their emails, and they'll send you special offers and discounts as well as gift ideas. Trecktangles is an artist shop on the Society 6 site, so you can get from there, you can browse to other artists in a lot of different genres, some of them geeky, some of them more artsy, to find a lot of different products and ideas for a lot of people on your list, geek or not. For your younger geeks, you should check out the site Nerdy with Children. Again, they have a big focus on clothing, but you can get superheroes and science fiction. And one of the neat things about them is they also have a section called Real Heroes for Real Kids. And so there you can find a Galileo t-shirt, a Marie Curie t-shirt, or Tesla, or Jules Verne. So that's kind of cool that it's not just focused on the fictional characters, but on real people who've made a difference in science and technology. They also have adult products, so if you want, you can get a matching set of shirts for the entire family, and that can make for a very special holiday photo to go on all of your Christmas greeting cards. Personally, I really think that I need to have a baby now because I have got to have their Han Solo baby romper, which is called Shot First Romper. I'm not quite sure if they're saying Han shot first or not, but it kind of sounds like it. The Arcane store features clothing and accessories, but also has a really wide range of other things, posters and collectibles and household items. But I think one of the coolest things about this site is that you can search and sort by different kinds of products, different genre. So if you're just looking for Star Trek, you can do that. If you're just looking for Jurassic Park, they're particularly featuring right now 007 and Back to the Future, as well as, like I said, Jurassic Park. You can find things really easily. Now, they are based in London, so shipping might be a little bit tricky. On their site, they do have a guide to the last date that they can ship to different parts of the world. So if you're in Asia or Africa or the Middle East, unfortunately, the date has passed that they'll be able to get you things before Christmas. But if you don't care about getting it by Christmas, then it doesn't matter. You can just order it for another time. All of Europe, Canada, the US, you can still get things for the next few days at least. For some unusual finds, you should follow Toys for Geeks. And the actual handle is Toys for Geek, without the S on the end, on Twitter. And they post links to everything cool that they find for products. And so, for instance, they have virtual reality devices and Marty McFly sneakers and all kinds of things in between. They don't have a separate website, so you do have to follow them on Twitter. Probably the most comprehensive site out there is Think Geek, and there again you can shop by category and by interest, and they do have the usual kinds of clothing as well as toys and electronics and gadgets and home and office things, but they also have outdoor items. So you can get, for instance, a zombie gnome for your garden, or you can get actual survival gear. So not only can you buy Walking Dead stuff, but you can prepare for the zombie apocalypse, I'm guessing. They have a special section just for kids. And they also divide their site along with bestsellers as well as exclusive offers. They specifically have a section right now for holiday gifts, and they're featuring all sorts of the usual science fiction as well as games. Not all of the sites focus on games at all, so you can find Minecraft and Zelda as well as like Marvel and DC, Game of Thrones and all of that. Lots of their stuff is unique, and I'm not seeing it on these other sites, so check it out. Think Geek also has a really cool monkey logo. I gotta love that monkey. And for our picks of gifts under $50 for your geek, you can go to our blog, which is geekhomeworld.blogspot.com. We have a dozen or so products that we found, all under $50, so super affordable. And we have directly the link to Amazon, so you can go to Amazon directly from there, purchase it if you like it, and have it shipped to you. And again, Amazon also will have available for you what the final shipping dates are, or what you need to do in order to expedite something if you need to get it sooner than it would be available by general delivery. So check out the blog. Again, that's geekhomeworld.blogspot.com. You'll see everything there from Star Trek panties for her, as well as Dale's RV set from The Walking Dead, which if you watch The Talking Dead, you've already seen that and probably wanted to get it. If you're into being one of the bad guys, there's an Avengers Hydra necklace, as well as Doctor Who sets. A really cool, I think, Mr. Potato Head with the different Marvel figures, so you can dress him up as Iron Man or Captain America and mix them around. And for all of you folks who love The Lord of the Rings, you can get the ring, one ring to rule them all. And what's better than that for the holidays? So have a great time out there. Enjoy your shopping, enjoy each other, and have a great holiday season.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
We're talking about the new X-Men Apocalypse trailer that dropped, and it is awesome. The movie comes out May 27th, 2016, which is Memorial Day weekend. I simply cannot wait for this movie. We already know that the other big movie release coming out next summer will be Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, and that trailer, recently dropped, and it is like super awesome. I definitely cannot wait for that. I've been waiting a long time since Man of Steel for that. But this segment is all about X-Men Apocalypse. The teaser trailer came out, and it's a movie, like I said, I've been waiting for since the 1990s when the whole storyline of Apocalypse was like really prevalent. That's when I was really introduced to it. It's an awesome storyline with Apocalypse, and with Bryan Singer taking the helm of the X-Men franchise, and especially bringing the continuity back together when he did Days of Future Past, which to me was probably one of the best in the X-Men movie series. And Days of Future Past did fix a lot of the timeline and put some of the continuity together, but it did put us also on a different timeline, which some people forget about. So we're going to see some different ramifications of that change in the timeline. So before we jump right into the description of the trailer for X-Men Apocalypse, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of the background on the origin of Apocalypse. For those of you that don't know, Apocalypse is probably the strongest, most powerful, most everything mutant in the X-Men universe. And he is just awesome. So let's talk about the origin of Apocalypse from the comics. Apocalypse's real name is Sabernur, or the First One. He was born in Arkaba in ancient Egypt more than several millennia ago. The first time that Apocalypse showed up in the comics was in X Factor number 5 in 1986. So in ancient Egypt, under the ruling of Ramatut, Sabernur, or the First One, Apocalypse, later known as Apocalypse, was found by a bunch of nomads that were wandering the Sahara Desert. And he was this very gray-skinned, kind of deformed-looking infant, and they took him in the Egyptian desert there, and they taught him what would become his mantra, survival of the fittest, especially since he was an infant and raising him up as a child. They did not know, of course, that he was a mutant. At the time, nobody knew what mutants were back in ancient Egypt, that millennia or so ago. So anyway, when Apocalypse became an adult, and the nomads, they were captured and enslaved by the Grand Vicar at the time, named Ozymandias. And Apocalypse rebelled and killed Ozymandias' soldiers, all of his men there. And Apocalypse himself was killed, but because of his genetic mutation, he was revived. He then discovered Ramatut's technology that was hidden beneath the sands of the Sahara Desert. Apocalypse pretty much killed everybody, and he used that technology to regenerate himself, becoming more powerful every time that he went into this hibernation or regenerative cycle. Apocalypse would regenerate for several years, decades, sometimes centuries, in fact. Then in the comics, he came across an abandoned spaceship that was left by the Immortals, and if you don't know about them, they're called the Celestials, and they were basically the most ancient of gods, and they were these very tall, monolithic type gods of the universe, and definitely immortals, and they were godlike beings in that sense. Apocalypse became obsessed with trying to figure out the technology, and he crossed paths with a guy named Nathan Christopher Charles Sumner, aka Cable, one of my favorite X-Men, and Cable is the time-traveling son of Cyclops and a clone made by Mr. Sinister of Jean Grey, known as Madeline Pryor. So Cyclops and Madeline Pryor were his parents, and Cable was genetically created by Mr. Sinister. He's a time-traveling mutant, and he was infected with this, what they call the techno-organic virus. And the techno-organic virus was taking over his whole body, and basically, it's a long, kind of drawn-out story, but it's actually a very good read. You should really read up on Cable. Check out the series, especially in the 90s. For me, that was the heyday of a lot of comics, and Cable was one of my favorites. I think I probably read all the comics that they had on that. So anyway, Cable basically is the lifelong adversary of Apocalypse. He's a good guy trying to stop Apocalypse, and basically this gets very confusing, but Mr. Sinister, which I'll tell you in about a minute, takes the DNA from Jean Grey, creates a clone, Madeline Pryor, and that's where Cable comes from, and Scott doesn't realize it until after they have the kid. And then, so anyway, in one of the greatest battles, Apocalypse is defeated by Cable. Ozymandias pulls Apocalypse into the celestial ship, and Apocalypse gets infected during the battle that almost kills him with Cable, and he gets some of Cable's techno-organic virus, and that allows him to control the celestial ship. Now, being genetically created as using the DNA of Scott Summers and Jean Grey, Cable basically has the best parts of both of them, and he's telekinetic. He's also got like the most badass weaponry you'll ever find. And basically, Cable's just a badass. So anyway, Ozymandias gets the infected, almost dead Apocalypse back to the celestial ship, which he regenerates and heals. And a question remains, and I did not see in the trailer Cable at all, and I really want to see Cable. And Cable, if you watch the X-Men series, which if you haven't, you really should get it and watch it, from the 90s. It was called X-Men. It was on Fox Kids Network. It used to come on, and there was about 6 seasons of it, and they did the whole Apocalypse thing, and he had some wonderful, just the gentleman that did the voice of Apocalypse just nailed the character just perfectly, and he's very over the top, very end of the world Apocalypse and all that. And he has his 4 horsemen, which we'll talk about in a second. Sound familiar? Anyway, so I don't know whether we're going to see Cable or not, but he's definitely one of my favorite X-Men characters. So let's flash forward to the 12th century in the Crusades. Apocalypse wakes up from his regenerative sleep, which I was thinking about. It kind of reminds me of Odin's sleep. Basically, Thor's father, Thor and Loki's dad, or mainly Thor's dad, Odin has a thing called Odin sleep, and during that Odin sleep, Odin becomes regenerated, similar to how Apocalypse does the same thing, but it's a little bit similar, and I wonder if anybody's ever made that comparison, but it just occurred to me. So we're talking 12th century here, and basically Apocalypse comes across this man named Bennett DeTerry, and he is a mutant, and he renames him and remakes him and imbues him with powers, and he becomes Exodus, who's later an acolyte of Magneto when Magneto goes bad in the comics. You definitely got to check out that if you hadn't. Let's flash forward to 19th century England, And Apocalypse shows up again after another regenerative sleep pattern, and he remakes Nathaniel Essex into Mr. Sinister. And if you watch the X-Men cartoon from the 90s, you'll see how obsessed Mr. Sinister was with the Summers Gray gene line or whatever. And that's how, like I just told you, he takes the DNA from, he's a geneticist by trade, and he manipulates and combines the DNA of Scott Summers and Jean Grey to make a clone of Jean Grey named Madeline Pryor. And Scott, believing that Madeline was really Jean, they have a child named Nathan, which is Cable. And later on, Scott, aka Cyclops, is able to send Nathan into the future because Nathan has to overcome that techno-organic virus as an infant that's about to kill him and take him over. And part of the power that his telekinetic power helps him hold that techno-organic virus kind of at base. So he's kind of like half man, half machine. So he's kind of a little bit of a cyborg, I guess you would say. And for more about that, you definitely want to go to Marvel.com, check out their origin stories on X-Men, on Cable, and all that. Now, let's talk about Apocalypse. He's always had 4 horsemen, just like in the Bible. And in the trailer, they kind of say, oh, like in the Bible. And they said, well, maybe the Bible got it from that. Well, that may disturb some people, but it's interesting how they're playing on this. And this has been part of Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen. And his 4 horsemen, obviously, are death, war, famine, and pestilence. In the comics, the most famous X-Men to become a 4 horseman was, of course, Warren Worthington III, or Angel. And he basically is fighting in the Morlock tunnels and gets his wings cut off. And Apocalypse finds him. The X-Men think he's dead. And he remakes him into Archangel. And he has these metallic wings that shoot these, like, poison metallic dart arrow kind of things. It's projectiles of sort, and it's just very, very awesome. And interesting enough, another former mutants that have served as, because here's the thing, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but as one of the 4 horsemen, Angel became Archangel, and basically also known as Death. Okay. And he was one of the 4 horsemen, and interesting enough, mutants that served as one of the 4 horsemen, known as Death, were Gambit in the comics, Wolverine. Can you imagine that? It was awesome storyline. And now in the X-Men movie, Caliban, who can sense mutants. He was a Morlock in the Morlock tunnels, and he actually appears in the trailer, Caliban. And of course, Apocalypse is getting with him to sense other mutants and their powers. And there was a time where Scott Summers, Cyclops, a.k.a. Scott Summers, was one of the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse. And there's so many different, in all the continuity, there's so many different stories in the comics, but not to confuse things too much. And there's another interesting fact that I found out, that in the comics, Hulk was one of the 4 horsemen. And he was War, and I could definitely see that. In X-Men Apocalypse, the movie, we are looking at Archangel, Magneto, Psylocke. And Psylocke, by the way, is for many of you that don't know, she was always involved with Warren Worthington III when he was Angel. But Psylocke, played by Olivia Munn in X-Men Apocalypse, the movie, she's a mutant telepath who has a psychic knife power. It's not like an actual knife, it's more like a psychic dagger, I guess you would call it. And we see her, Psylocke, Archangel, Magneto, and Storm being the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse. And basically we find out in the trailer that Apocalypse can control all mutants, and he's come back to rule over them. And you got to remember what his plan is: survival of the fittest. And basically, he's going to pit them all against each other to find out who's going to survive, including humanity, which they're not worthy in his eyes. No one's really worthy. And he basically, in the voiceover, says that he's essentially like their father. He was the first mutant. And he said that you're all being led by blind people, meaning, people that don't have his original philosophy of survival of the fittest. And they show a shot of Charles. His plan, survival of the fittest, and he was the first mutant ever, thousands of years ago. So what about his abilities? Apocalypse, he has many abilities that are augmented by his alien technology. He can change his mass, his size. He can have the power of flight sometimes. He can use his arms as different weapons. He can control mutants like in the movie. He has telepathy. He can change things on a molecular level so that he's like essentially a shapeshifter. He is also known as an external because he is immortal. You basically can't kill him. He's like one of the Celestials. Apocalypse also wears a body armor that augments his abilities further, making him even stronger. He's extremely intelligent. He can switch bodies when he burns out his body, essentially. Kind of like he needs like a new host body, essentially. So he goes into his Lazarus chamber. He is also a master of genetics and biochemistry, and he's definitely the deadliest of the X-Men foes that they've ever met. My favorite representation was from the 90s X-Men cartoon series, where I thought they just did him perfectly, Apocalypse. He had such great lines, like, he just was all these great over-the-top speeches. And one of the things he would say, I am the rock of the eternal shore, crash against me and break. And it was just very almost operatic, the performance for a cartoon. They did it really well, Stan Lee and everyone on the X-Men cartoon series from the 90s. And there's also the Age of Apocalypse storyline, which is essentially a world without Professor X. And that storyline eventually led to the rise of Onslaught, where in a little bit, it's a different storyline. There's also Days of Future Past, which we saw. That came from the 80s comic book storyline, but we saw that on the big screen and changed a little bit, a few things here and there, but still basically the same thing. But one of my favorite storylines is Onslaught, and that's where Professor X wipes Magneto's mind after Magneto rips the adamantium from Wolverine's bones, and we find out that his claws are really, the adamantium was added to his skeleton. At first we didn't know that at the time, and that was awesome. And it had one of those lenticular covers, if you remember those back in the day, if you collected comic books back in the 90s. And it basically, Xavier merges with the bad side of Magneto when he wipes his mind and shuts his mind off. And it creates this entity called Onslaught, and it's like the darkness inside Xavier that he kind of, pushes down, because if he left his feelings unchecked, kind of like Storm in a way, it caused all kinds of, pardon the pun, but havoc. They cause a lot of craziness, but Onslaught, to a point, he basically, the whole universe beyond the X-Men has to fight him, and he at one point becomes pure thought, and it's just a very wild storyline. You should check out Onslaught if you hadn't. And so to the trailer now, we see Jean having a dream, or maybe she's just sensing Apocalypse for the first time, and she sees looks like a nuclear blast and this ancient Egyptian writing. Charles tells her, hey, it's just a dream. Then we see Moira McTaggart telling Charles and Havoc, which is Cyclops' brother, Scott Summers' brother. And then we see she's telling, Moira McTaggart's telling Charles and Havoc about Apocalypse. And next we see Storm with the mohawk, not the gray one, not just yet. And she's probably in Egypt somewhere, and or being, the part where she's a street urchin. And Apocalypse is telling his different names throughout history that he's been referred to. Moira McTaggart's talking about Apocalypse again, and then we see a shot of Nightcrawler, which looks kind of awesome. Then a shot of Jubilee. Then we have Warren Worthington III, Angel Archangel, and then we have a shot of Psylocke with her psychic dagger. Next, we see Magneto's being controlled by Apocalypse, and he's dragging Charles in his wheelchair through the hallway in the X-Mansion, backwards. Mystique is in this movie, and I read actually that she's not going to be in the blue paint. She's going to be herself. So I guess after Days of Future Past, she decided she's not going to be Mystique, but she's going to be her true self, Raven Darkholme, but she's still going to fight. Anyway, so we see that Mystique is assembling the team, which includes Beast, and Quicksilver's back, which is awesome. So anyway, we've got Quicksilver and the team and Beast. And then we get this destruction scene. We see Cyclops, Jean, and Nightcrawler. Then a bit of Cyclops just letting his optic blast go loose. And he's like, some of us can't control our powers. And Raven's like, this is war. You don't need to control your powers. Let it loose. And he kind of does. Then we see Magneto being controlled by Apocalypse. This great scene of a very tall Apocalypse inside like the mansion with one hand, an oversized hand, just crushing Xavier on the floor, which is one of the best scenes in the trailer. Then we see Archangel, just an awesome, beautiful shot. And some of the posters from this are awesome. And Storm, and she's got her gray hair now, gray mohawk and all that. And she's like riding the lightning, which is really cool new power. Then we have Magneto just kind of letting loose, and they're raining destruction down, all the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse there. Archangel, Storm, Magneto, and Psylocke. And then we see Apocalypse making this great voiceover announcing that he is cleansing the earth, essentially, of the unworthy. There's this great destruction scene that follows with like these plumes of destruction from the water and these bridges. X-Men movies like to blow up bridges, it looks like a lot. Then we see Xavier using Cerebro, and he's saying he's never felt a power as strong as this before, and his eyes turn black as anything, which is so wild. I don't know. Then the trailer ends with the bald-headed Xavier in the wheelchair looking a lot like a younger Patrick Stewart. And I tell you, the trailer to X-Men looks incredible, and I cannot wait to see it. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.
Geek Homeworld.